Welcome to a deep dive. This is where we take these fascinating sources you've shared and we'll really dig into them to pull out the key insights.
That's right. And today we're tackling something pretty hefty. Excerpts dealing with Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. It's a complex world.
Definitely complex. The sources you sent cover a lot of ground. Looks like key moments from roughly part 2 through part 10 of the story.
Exactly. So our goal here is to kind of navigate those tangled relationships, get a sense of the, deep psychological stuff going on.
And pull out the core dynamics that these specific materials highlight. Think of it as a shortcut, maybe, to understanding these pivotal moments.
Yeah, hopefully with some of those aha moments along the way. It's all based on the discussions in the sources you provided.
Perfect. So we're sticking just to what these sources tell us about the characters, the family conflicts, the faith, the cynicism.
The love lives, which are incredibly messy.
Oh, yeah. And some really explosive confrontations, too. So let's jump in. Where do the sources suggest we start?
Well, it makes sense to start with the father, Fyodor Karamazov. He's sort of the negative center of gravity here. The sources paint him as deeply neglectful right away.
Neglectful feels mild. What specifics do the sources pull out about him and the sons early on?
Well, there's this one really telling bit where someone comes asking for Dmitri, his eldest son, and Fyodor literally asks who Dmitri is.
Wow. Doesn't even know his own son's name, basically.
It suggests this incredible detachment, like he just shipped them off to relatives and, forgot about them.
Okay, so completely checked out. And Dmitri, the eldest, seems like he had a pretty rough time because of this.
Absolutely. The sources mention him being passed around between guardians, relatives who had their own lives. He ends up in the army.
Right, and his rank goes up and down.
Yeah, demoted, promoted back. But the main thing, the constant thread for Dmitri that the sources emphasize from the get-go is this conflict with Fyodor, always simmering, about money, inheritance.
So it's not just something that blows up later. It's there from the beginning, rooted in that neglect.
That's exactly the picture the sources give. It's this foundational tension that just builds and builds.
Okay. Then you've got Alexei, Alyosha. He seems like the complete opposite in many ways.
He really is presented that way.
Yeah.
Spiritually inclined, decides to join the monastery early on. There's a detail about him visiting his mother's grave. Grigory, the servant, helps him. It shows a connection, a sensitivity lacking elsewhere.
And the sources describe him as what? Innocent, pure, non-judgmental.
Exactly, non-judgmental. And that seems really key according to the material. It's why people open up to him, right? Even people who wouldn't normally talk.
Yeah, that makes sense. He becomes this kind of confidant figure.
He does. Even though he initially tries to escape the family drama by going to the monastery, the sources say he eventually feels called to leave, to actually try and engage with his family's problems.
So his spiritual journey leads him back into the mess, not away from it.
Precisely. It's a really interesting turn mentioned in the material.
And the third brother, Ivan, the intellectual.
Yeah, Ivan, sharp mind, logical. And here's an interesting contrast the sources point out. Unlike Dmitri's constant fighting with Fyodor, Ivan's relationship with his father actually seemed to improve.
Improve with Fyodor. That's surprising.
Yeah.
How do the sources explain that?
Well, it suggests Fyodor maybe started to rely on Ivan's intellect, consulting
Wow.
him. So a different dynamic. Less purely emotional, perhaps.
Okay.
But the sources also note Ivan meets Dmitri early, and Dmitri immediately feels like he needs to talk to Ivan about something important.
So even Ivan, with his maybe slightly better connection to Fyodor, gets pulled right into Dmitri's orbit and the central conflict. They're all tied together.
Absolutely. And that core conflict, especially the money dispute, leads us to this really striking scene the sources describe, the meeting at the monastery with Elder Zosima.
Right. This is where they try to get the elder to mediate. He's described as this highly respected, almost saintly figure.
Yeah, a huge spiritual presence. The hope was, brought the fight into this sacred space. Maybe his influence could calm things down.
But Fyodor doesn't exactly play along, does he? The sources describe his behavior as bizarre.
Totally bizarre. Acting like a clown, making crude jokes, just completely inappropriate for the setting, undermining the whole point.
And in the middle of all that, Elder Zosima says something really powerful to Fyodor.
He does. The sources highlight his words about lying, especially lying to oneself, how it destroys your ability to see truth, leads to self-hatred, corruption.
And the way it's described, like the elder looked right into his soul. That suggests something more than just advice, right? Like real insight.
Definitely. It implies this deep spiritual perception. But even with Zosima there, the argument between Fyodor and Dmitri just explodes anyway.
They couldn't hold it back.
No. The sources detail the accusations flying back and forth, the sheer anger, years of resentment boiling over.
It shows how deep that wound is. But then comes the most visually stunning moment the sources describe. Zosima's prostration.
Yes. Kneeling down, touching his forehead to the floor right in front of Dmitri. Everyone is just stunned.
And the sources say it hinted at some kind of foresight about Dmitri's future.
Exactly. It's this deeply mysterious gesture. What does he see coming for Dmitri? It hangs in the air. Utterly unforgettable image from the material.
Wow. Okay, so alongside this family implosion, the sources also really dig into the romantic entanglements, which are complicated.
Understatement, especially for Dmitri. He's torn between two women. First, there's Katerina Ivanovna.
Right? Described as beautiful, smart, good family. Dmitri wants to marry her initially, even though he's got a bad reputation.
And the sources focus on this key incident with her father's debt. He desperately needs 4,500 rubles.
And Katerina goes to Dmitri for the money. That must have been incredibly difficult for her.
Humiliating, yeah, but courageous too. The sources suggest this act kind of binds them, or at least Dmitri feels that way. She later gets an inheritance, they become engaged.
But then Grushenka arrives on the scene.
And boom, everything shifts. Dmitri's affection swings dramatically towards Grushenka, according to the sources. That sets up the central love triangle. Dmitri, Katerina, Grushenka. Super volatile.
And just to make it even messier, the sources mention Ivan secretly has feelings for Katerina.
They do. Plus, there's this insight the sources attribute to Dmitri himself, this idea that maybe Katerina doesn't love him so much as the idea of saving him, that maybe she'd be better off with someone like Ivan.
That's quite self-aware in a way. Recognizing her motivation might not be pure affection.
It suggests a certain depth to Dmitri's perception, even amidst his chaos.
Meanwhile, Alexei, the innocent one, he has his own romance brewing, right? With Lace Koklikov.
Yes, the sources describe their meeting, her mother kind of nudging things along, and Alexei actually proposes. It seems based on her perceived innocence and kindness, qualities he values.
The sources also mention Lise being a bit playful, maybe possessive, joking about spying on him.
Right. But Alexei apparently maintains his principles, his boundaries, even while treasuring her letter. There's a little anecdote about her mother trying to get him to read the letter out loud and him refusing. Shows respect for privacy.
Okay, so amidst all this high drama, there's also this other figure the sources introduce, Simdikov.
Smerdyakov, yeah. He's presented as quite cynical. And the sources emphasize his difficult childhood as shaping that.
Specifically, the public ridicule his mother Elizaveta faced.
Exactly. It seems to have left him deeply bitter, isolated. The sources highlight his desire to just escape everything, escape his past, even escape Russia itself.
He dreams of going to Moscow, becoming a cook.
Yeah, and there's this really startling detail, his wish that Napoleon had actually conquered Russia.
Wow. Wishing for the invader to have won. I mean, that tells you everything about his level of alienation, doesn't it?
It speaks volumes. The sources also mention his disdain for dueling, unlike Maria, who seems fascinated by it. He fears conflict, which comes out in a song he sings.
And how does he get pulled into the main family drama?
Reluctantly, it seems. Alexei finds him, and Smerdyakov reveals Dmitri told him to watch Fyodor's house for Grushenka. And Dmitri apparently made a serious threat if Smerdyakov failed.
So even this cynical outsider gets caught in the Karamazov web. And all this tension, the money, the love triangles, the resentment, it all leads to this incredibly violent climax the sources describe.
It really does. A shocking scene at Fyodor's house. Dmitri bursts in, absolutely furious, looking for Grushenka.
Convinced his father is hiding her, and the sources detail the violence.
Right.
He attacks Grigory first.
Yes, the loyal servant who tries to stop him. Then he goes after Fyodor. Punches him down, kicks him violently in the face. It's brutal.
Just pure rage. The sources mention him breaking an aquarium, too.
Yeah, like his frustration just explodes physically, destructively. He's completely lost control.
That detail, kicking his father when he's down, it's horrific.
It is. Ivan and Alexei have to step in to physically restrain him.
And again, it's Alexei who manages to get through. The sources note his calming effect.
By telling him Grushenka isn't there. That truth seems to pierce the rage enough for Dmitri to leave, though he's still yelling threats.
And as he leaves, he tells Alexei to visit Katerina with his regards. That specific phrase.
Loaded, right, given everything. But what's maybe even more revealing is Fyodor's reaction after being brutally attacked.
What do the sources say? He wasn't concerned about his injuries.
Not at all. He was apparently excited by the possibility that Grushenka might actually been there. His obsession completely overshadowed the physical assault.
That is just, oh, wow, his priorities are so warped. Okay, so the aftermath involves Katerina and Ivan again.
Right. The sources suggest Ivan sees Dmitri's regards message as maybe opening a door with Katerina, but then he's hurt when she seems to deny having feelings for him.
And when Alexei does go to see Katerina, as Dmitri asked, he finds her surprisingly kind this time, a contrast to before.
Exactly. Which sets up another dramatic encounter described in the sources. Katerina and Gushenka are already together when Alexei arrives. Katerina apparently sought her out.
Okay, the two rivals meeting. What happens?
Katerina starts with flattery,
Yeah.
calls Grushenka an angel, even kisses her hand, like a sign of respect or maybe strategy.
Interesting tactic, but it backfires.
Massively. Grushenka deliberately refuses to kiss Katerina's hand back. And the sources say she tells Katerina she wants her to remember the refusal. It's a calculated insult.
Oh, that's cold. Aimed right at Katerina's pride.
And Katerina just explodes. The sources describe her rage, the insults, low woman, two-penny creature, and this immediate physical reaction, feeling like she wants to attack Grushenka, having these fits.
Fits, like a breakdown.
Yeah, panic attack or breakdown. Alexei has to separate them. And this is where the sources explicitly connect Katerina's physical state to her inner turmoil.
They link the fits to subconscious conflict, to guilt.
Precisely. Her illness, these fits, are presented as the physical manifestation of everything tearing her apart inside. Her pride, her maybe misguided sacrifice for Dmitri, her possible feelings for Ivan, the guilt over Ivan leaving. It all comes out physically.
So the psychological quite literally makes her sick. That's a powerful connection the sources draw.
It really is, mind and body totally linked. As Alexei leaves all this, a maid gives him a letter, reminding us of Lisa's letter.
Right, his own life continues amidst the chaos. And the sources briefly mention Lise tending to his hurt finger, them talking about marriage.
Yeah, just a small moment reinforcing their connection, showing that personal hope still exists, even in this destructive environment.
So pulling back and looking at everything these sources have shown us, what's the takeaway? We've seen this family just ripping itself apart.
Absolutely. Conflict, deep resentment, these incredibly tangled desires, all set against this backdrop of, genuine spiritual searching from Alexei and Zosima, but also intense cynicism from people like Smerdyakov.
We've seen shocking violence, moments of real tenderness, manipulation, and this deep psychological pain that, as you said, actually manifests physically.
And the sources really highlight those connections, don't they? How Fyodor's neglect fuels Smerdykov's cynicism, how Katerina's pride gets tangled up with sacrifice, how guilt can literally make you ill.
Yeah, it's a glimpse into a world where nothing is simple. Motives are mixed, relationships are messy, and finding any kind of truth means confronting some really hard things about yourself and others. It's powerful stuff.
It really is. What stands out most to you from this deep dive into the Karamazovs as presented in these sources, and thinking about that connection between the internal and the external, how much do you think our own hidden conflicts play out in the world around us, maybe in ways we don't always recognize?
Yeah.
Definitely something to chew on.